H3 podcast host Ethan Klein has announced that he has filed for a defamation lawsuit against Noah Samsen after the YouTuber accused him of, quote, being pro-genocide. It basically looks to be a very weak lawsuit, legally speaking, and I just don't really understand the point of it. So guys, up first, we're going to talk about the latest legal drama in the world of YouTube stars. And they do like to sue each other a lot. There are always lawsuits going down in this community of like commentary channels and political podcast channels that are like, or really, they're more so often podcast channels that don't start out political but then eventually become political. And at the heart of a lot of this controversy is somebody named Ethan Klein, who I can't say that I'm hugely familiar with. I know that he is like an internet famous person. I've only consumed a very small amount of his content though. But he is suing. I am familiar with him in the context of his past friendship with Hassan Piker and their kind of public breakup over the Israel-Palestine conflict and all of that. And then I'm also familiar with him because he has sued some content creators for live streaming his content and violating his IP by not really even reacting to it, just like playing it while they had a snack or something. Like, so that's a whole nother thing. But he does seem to be quite a litigious person. And while those past lawsuits actually, to me, at least on face value, seem to be have some merit, right? Because you're allowed to use other people's content in reaction and commentary if you're actually reacting and commenting on it, not if you're just like hitting play on a 2-hour documentary someone else produced and then eating chips and like profiting off of this while adding no value. He might, who knows? Don't take my word for it to the bank, but that might actually be a legitimate lawsuit. But he's now suing a leftist YouTuber, Noah Samsen, for a video that he did that accused Ethan Klein of, in my view, wrongly, accused him of supporting genocide. And this is a defamation argument and lawsuit. Here's the headline: Why is Ethan Klein suing Noah Samsen? Podcaster's defamation lawsuit against YouTuber explained. H3 podcast host Ethan Klein has announced that he has filed for a defamation lawsuit against Noah Samsen after the YouTuber accused him of, quote, being pro-genocide. On the 255th episode of the H3 show, titled I Am Suing Noah Samsen, Ethan Klein claimed that Noah Samsen made heinous accusations against him in his YouTube video, The YouTubers Who Backed a Genocide. And here, I pulled up the thumbnail from that video that Noah Samsen made, which has over 1 million views on YouTube. You can see he has Ethan Klein pointing at like the ruins of Gaza with a Israeli flag stuck in there. So obviously that is just like a artistic license there. That's not a real photo. It's a thumbnail, and it doesn't have to be an exact likeness of a real thing that happened. But so Ethan he opened up his podcast yesterday discussing the lawsuit and actually the great lengths that he went to sue this person, Noah Samsen, and to identify and find him. Apparently, he had to like hire a private investigator to track down this person for service. And he got really close to the deadline for the statute of limitations for it to almost run out. But he is now suing him, and we will see how far this goes. I'm going to give you my take on it. First, though, we'll watch the clip of Ethan explaining this on his podcast.
It's been a while since I spoke about dear friend Noah Samsen, who had a penchant for accusing me of being pro-genocide. He thought it was cute. He thought it was fun throwing around such kind of heinous accusations, right? This guy supports genocide. In fact, he had even a video called The YouTubers That Supported a Genocide with me in it. And, you know, that's the world we're living in. I think he probably thought that it had blown over. I think a lot of people probably thought it blew over. We had a nice little complaint there for defamation, for accusing me of being pro-genocide, in favor of genocide. Horrible thing to say about someone, by the way.
I would agree with that, just to pause here for a second, that it is a horrible thing to accuse someone of. But frankly, people are accused of horrible and heinous things every single day all over the internet and all over political commentary that they did not do and are not at all guilty of. And I should just be clear that Ethan Klein is not pro genocide in any meaningful sense. Now, they're, of course, talking about Israel's war on Gaza and they're viewing it as a genocide. But we don't even have to debate the question of whether it is a genocide. Ethan doesn't support that war and is actually incredibly sympathetic to the Palestinians and has been for a long time. He just gets a bad rap as like pro genocide or whatever because he like doesn't believe the state of Israel should be abolished. And he and his wife are both Israeli citizens. And so, yes, she served in the IDF, which they hold against her, but it is compulsory. So I'm not really sure how that's fair. And just generally speaking, like you can find clips of Ethan talking about the plight of the Palestinians and the violations of their rights and all this stuff. So it is such a weird and unhinged thing against him that people have always attacked him as if he's like just brutally supporting the brutal repression of the Palestinians. That's like not true, and it's really never been true. That said, the case here is going to turn on whether saying someone is pro genocide and kind of expounding on why in a broader sense is really defamation or if that's an opinionated characterization. Because like if I say a statement that directly accuses someone of something as a statement of fact, like if I say you are a racist, you someone, right? That's a statement of fact that you can then challenge. But if I say something like you are a racist, right? That is an opinion that I view you as a racist person. Or if I say you support racism, you can't simply refute that and say that's like defamatory just because you're on the record saying you're against racism. It's my opinion you're racist or you functionally are supporting racism by, for example, supporting Donald Trump or something. Now, that's obviously not my opinion. I'm speaking hypothetically here. I'm trying to lay this out. So the contention here is going to be whether Noah Samsen can effectively argue that like, yeah, Ethan says he's not pro genocide, but I think he is because he implicitly supports Israel and this and that. Noah Samsen actually views Israel itself as a genocidal project, like the nation of Israel. I don't, but like regardless of whether or not, it's like so. It's essentially his opinion that Ethan is effectively pro genocide. Would be the counter argument to the idea that this is defamation, and it's already a hard sell for me because it's like defamation when you have a public figure, and Ethan Klein is objectively a public figure. Even I'm a public figure for the purposes of defamation law, and I'm like, you know, 1/1000th of the size of an Ethan Klein. It's almost impossible to approve to meet the legal threshold for defamation for a public figure because you have to prove actual malice that they either knew what they were saying was false and published it anyway. And Noah Samsen, at least to me, seems like a true believer who genuinely does believe that Ethan Klein is pro genocide. What now? Maybe you think that's delusional that he believes that, but I think it'd be pretty hard to prove that he was lying and didn't actually believe that. Or you've got to prove that they just demonstrated reckless disregard for the truth. And I don't really think Ethan's going to be able to prove that. And I did watch his full thing going through the lawsuit. It was quite lengthy, but I'm just showing you a snippet of it here. But that's going to be a hard sell. Anyway, let's watch the rest of his video about this.
By the way, one of the worst, I would say, maybe even of all the things you could say about someone. This document is actually quite important to me. It archives and sets forth for the record all the defamatory bull that has been peddled by Noah and everyone else across the internet. Baseless, disgusting, hurtful accusations that I support genocide.
So here's where I have sympathy for Ethan on an emotional level, maybe not necessarily a legal level, like the strength of his lawsuit, but yeah, it's terrible that all these people have like maligned you and misrepresented you. I agree. But it is also, unfortunately, in this day and age, kind of the price of existing as a political commentator. Or which he's not totally, but he has weighed into at times. everyone is massively misrepresented and smeared all the time. Like that's just the status quo of this space in the online and internet era, and that is incredibly unfortunate. And I that's why this lawsuit, like you can see it seems to be a deeply emotional endeavor for him. Like it represents an attempt to clear his name. And I can understand wanting to do that, but it doesn't actually mean that you have a strong legal case or that there aren't some pretty negative implications of like using lawsuits to silence people who criticize you. So I'll just watch the end of this and then we'll get into a little bit more analysis about the suit itself.
Genocide. So this is about holding Noah Samsen accountable as one of the main peddlers of this horrible defamation, but in large, just defending myself, my name. And this isn't something that's going to be litigated on TikTok or Twitter, which is where I know Hassan and Noah Samsen like to litigate such things. No, this is going to be litigated by a judge and potentially even a jury based on the facts.
So here's where I have to just be transparent about my total skepticism. I think this lawsuit will probably be dismissed by a judge for lack of merit, and that and if it's able to even proceed, because the problem with these kinds of lawsuits is that Ethan Klein has enormous wealth and resources, and the person he's suing doesn't necessarily. So they might be basically coerced into some kind of settlement simply because they can't afford the expensive legal fees of defending themselves. And but if this legal proceeding were to go through the process, I just don't see it getting very far with all the past defamation cases I've covered and what I've read about it. This is a non-legal opinion. Of course, I'm not a lawyer or an expert, but also that's what I'm seeing from a lot of legal commentators online who are themselves lawyers. For example, here is Legal Mindset, the YouTuber and lawyer. He wrote on X, unlike his copyright infringement lawsuit, the new defamation lawsuit against Noah Samsen is going to be an uphill battle for Klein, particularly with California's strong anti-SLAPP protections. I will be surprised if this survives. So it's basically looks to be a very weak lawsuit, legally speaking. And I just don't really understand the point of it or why. So the whole point of like defamation as a concept under the law is to recover damages and be able to hold people accountable when they lie about you and it harms you in a meaningful way, and you don't have the recourse to clear your name on your own right? But Ethan Klein already has a platform, massive platform, to explain to the world, and he has, that he is not in support of genocide or anything like that. And the the fact that some critics say horrible things about you is something I have tremendous sympathy for, but it's kind of the price of doing business in this industry. And I am really not comfortable with like wealthy people who have all the money in the world to waste on lawyers, because say that it ultimately gets dismissed and it costs him tens of thousands of dollars paying these lawyers, but then it doesn't matter. He's already a very wealthy guy. It's like you're essentially weaponizing the legal system with frivolous lawsuits to try to intimidate critics. This has actually happened to me in the past. I was sued, or I was part of a lawsuit against the company that I worked at, the Washington Examiner, the Right of Center magazine, from Roy Moore, who was a Senate candidate for the Republican Senate nomination in Alabama. And we wrote true things about the accusations against him. I did, at least. My article did not need a single correction and accurately stated all the facts, but he still like sued us for years. And luckily I was covered, but and ultimately all the lawsuits were dismissed and dropped or whatever, and they never went anywhere. But luckily I was covered at the time by the magazine and their lawyers. But if I had been an independent journalist and he'd sued me like that, I would have had to pay tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars just to defend myself from a lawsuit that had no chance of ever going anywhere. And you have to be on guard if you want a robust, open discourse and dialogue against that kind of thing. That's why like anti-SLAPP laws exist and should exist in many states, where it makes it easier to get these kind of SLAPP laws. It refers to strategic lawsuits against public participation is the acronym there. Essentially, it's talking about lawsuits that are designed to punish critics just through the process itself, even if the case is frivolous. And I think this is potentially one of those lawsuits. And I don't know whether Ethan knows that and is just doing it anyway out of like a vindictiveness, or whether he genuinely maybe believes there's a legal claim here and is going to have to probably find out the hard way that there's not much of one. But I think it's better as a society to err on the side of people being able to say things about other people that are hotly contested and extremely debatable and potentially even untrue than to have people too scared to speak their mind or call out people or say what needs to be said because a rich person's going to bury them in court fees and lawyer costs for years. And so I'm not pretending that that is like just an easy thing, because I personally have been lied about and have people accuse me of the most heinous crimes imaginable. And yet I have no legal recourse because I'm a public figure and the bar to prove anything would be is so unreasonably high. But you know what? Like at the end of the day, if you have to choose one, I think if you're somebody who believes in free speech and in the open discourse and exchange of ideas, it is better to exist in a society where people can err on the side of saying their piece and speaking their mind than one where lawsuits can be used like this to intimidate critics, even critics who are wrong. And I do think Ethan Klein is unfairly maligned here and not being just people are being totally unfair to him. But I can't get on board with the idea that it's up to courts to rectify that through defamation law.